So I'll give you a little time to work on the map, but let's go to get there. Where do we finish in here? Did we get, so we got 0, right? Is that right? Let's get back to 0. So we got right here, correct?
Yeah.
And don't forget, the thing about 0 was they could do large numbers. I'm going to turn the slide up because that's how the bright light reflecting off the stone. It's warmed up a little bit now.
You want to
No, I'd rather. Is this okay for everybody? Can we see? Okay. All right, so we have the printing press. So information about Columbus spread throughout Europe. That didn't exist until this era. Okay, let's get to this. Proto-market. The beginnings of a market. And the basis of a market in capitalism, a free market, where this is actually free capitalism, is the interaction of supply and demand. Let me backtrack here because this was not supposed to be like this. That should be number 2 was technological developments, 3 is photo. All the technological developments is just. What's what?
Navigation.
Navigation, those are all part of technology. Navigation, technology, military, it's all technological changes. And so the basic interaction of a marketplace, here's the very simple basic economics. Markets, how goods are, technology, navigation, military, that was all part of it.
What about
That was all part of 2. Those are all technological services.
That's all technology.
All technology, yep. So, proto market, the interaction of supply and demand. That's what decides wages. That's what decides prices. That's what decides how much a company produces, and that decides how many people enter the market or don't enter the market. In a technically free market, you have people who are going to supply goods and hopefully there are people to buy it. And the thing was, there was massive demand for those spices and for silk. And so in the basic market economy, there's demand. There's going to be people who want to meet that by building shipping or whatever it might be to produce those goods. And what's happening when they first, by going into about 1450, everybody wants spices, but there wasn't that much coming through that little pinched off trade through the Ottoman Empire in Genoa and Venice. If there's not many suppliers and a lot of demand, what happens to the price of spices? It goes up. And so that will encourage other people to get into the market. That's what encouraged Portugal to begin to go around Africa and eventually Spain to go west. And that's the way markets function. In fact, that's the way everything functions in a market. Wages are decided by supply and demand. If there's a shortage of workers and companies need employees, what happens to wages? Yeah. If there's lots of unemployed people, what happens to wages? Yeah. Wages, prices, all deal with the supply and demand. Hey, what happens if profits for a company goes up? What happens to wages? It's just devastating. Has no effect. No effect. Profits go down, has no effect on wages. Decided in the market. Which is a little disconcerting if you think about it. But what we have therefore is the beginnings of capitalism. We talked about this with the printing press, the beginnings of it. Where people owning the machines called capital are going to be able to hire workers, make investment, and they get the profit. So the people buy the shipping of the printing press, they keep the profit. One person owns the means of production. One person owns the shipping, owns the machines. This is our economy today. And I should add, people who don't know this, wow, do they get taken advantage by people who do know. Now, it could be people like me, but I'm relatively nice. You can trust me. No. So with that, so what we have is this idea though, you have to make investments to do this. And all the profit goes to the owner. And here's the thing. If the profits go to the owner, that means there's going to be an incentive to expand. There's going to be incentives to build more ships. There's going to be incentives to find more empire and get more trade. There's going to be a massive incentive to take incredible risks to go around Africa, literally risking everything, including your life. Get that frame. The risks are huge, but the incentives are big. And so the incentives are growing in this new system. Now the incentives are growing everything. And that shipping and the printing press will be the first ones that will be involved in what we can call capitalism, and they're directly related. The shipping to get across the sea and the printing press spread the information down. So you have to know these. You remember? Really. And you're the most brilliant person I know and remember all this. Just make sure you write these things down. I don't have a lot of sympathy for people who don't. So with that, next thing is huge ideological shifts. Huge ideological shifts. Now, ideology are strongly held beliefs. Beliefs we believe firmly. I mean, the most obvious ideology is a religion. If your religious belief, your faith could be philosophical belief, your create, how the world is created, whatever it might be, that's something you believe. And any evidence that might come in that you might contradict it, you will fight it bitterly. And ideologies are what divide politics. In fact, these are what wars are fought over. Strongly held beliefs. The American Civil War, so much of it was beliefs that weren't necessarily true, that the South, especially what the South had about Northern attitudes towards slavery. And if you don't believe me, by the way, this is a painting by Bruegel, but it's trying to show the different religious values fighting each other. And I don't understand it either, but it had a great impact in the 15th century. Yeah. But some examples with this would be the church had very strongly held ideology. And the whole ideology was rich people. At least this was something very confusing within early Christianity. Rich people, by their very nature of how they got rich, will they go to heaven? Because in the New Testament, it's very clear. No, they will not. Christianity was a poor person's religion. Well, you could imagine how this is going to change as more people with wealth came in and said, no, I actually really do want to go to heaven. That's coming. Well, it's going to shift ideas. And one of the big thing is, therefore, that whole idea is greed, especially in the form of usury, what's considered a sin in the early Christian ideology. Do you know what usury is? You're exactly right. It's interest rates. That's essentially you loan money and charge very high interest rates. That would be against the church. I should add. That is why the myth was going to happen of the Jewish faith. The Jews would loan the money, they didn't have that problem. Now this was a myth, but it's going to lead to a lot of prejudice. Usury, that is loaning at very high interest rates. So basically gouging. Charging interest rates of 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100%, that kind of thing. And that's way to make money. Why do you think banks all, in fact, once you turn 18, you're going to start getting credit card applications in the United States. Why? Because they can make a boatload of money and they target people your age. Oh, they come after you. Why? Because they figure you don't know anything. And it's up to you if you know anything about them. But they can take advantage of it. They can take advantage of the fact that you will probably borrow money, use a credit card, and then what kind of interest rates do credit cards charge? If you don't pay, for 1 month, they'll pay your full, goes up to as high as 30%. Compounded continuously, I should add. So, The Crusades started to change all this. They got really rich off of this. A lot of people got really rich. In fact, they also got a free pass to heaven. You remember, how could you go to heaven during the Crusades? Kill anybody that wasn't Christian, or at least close enough. And so this began to change this ideology. And the ideology by the 1400s was like, well, you know, if we could go to heaven for killing people, maybe this usury thing's not that big of a deal. And also humanism began to change that. They start thinking about the individual. And so it began to shift to greed actually might be a good thing. Greed might be a good thing. Maybe we misinterpreted what we believed for 1400 years. Greed could be good. Oops. Greed could be proof that God loves you if you're rich. If you're rich, that means you have God's blessings. And if you're poor, that means you're being punished. And there is a whole sect in Protestant faith right now called, oh my goodness, Lord. But basically the whole idea of it is that the richer you are, the more you prove that God loves you to this day. And so it's still with us. So why shouldn't we get rich? That's proving that we have been blessed. This is a big shift in ideology. So let's get to number 5. Modern nation states. Modern countries are going to be created now. Countries, unlike it, all we look at the blobs on the map, and you guys all did the 1500 one, which I'm going to hand back. Right, I'm going to hand back those when you guys are working on your other maps. Yes, I like maps, but those still really weren't countries yet. But soon, because of the Crusades and the Black Death, especially, monarchies began to take power. And they created more modern states. And they became in competition with each other. States became in competition. Once Spain became a nation, they're in competition with Portugal. And so they're going to have to do things like build weapons. These new weapons, and here's cannon. This is actually a diagram of cannon that were used at Constantinople. And this was called the Nuremberg paper, but they were going to be to sell to people to buy cannons. And therefore, new nations could be established to collect money. And therefore, they need taxes. We're all in competition. Modern nations would do this, and now they could do it. Double entry bookkeeping and zero. So this is how nations would be created. And with taxes, they got to collect this money. That means they not only need gold, they need people making money, and therefore empire. Empire would be a way to get that money, and that would lead to imperialism. Imperialism. Modern nation. Now the Romans did this, the Greeks did it. Conquer more land, that means more people to tax, gouge money to pay for weapons to conquer more, or to keep your area from being conquered. And it is called imperialism, essentially empire for profit. Empire. Now, it could be for money. It could be for any number of things. And now I'm looking around and notice a couple of have earbuds in their ears. You got one in your ear. Now, if I see that again, I will take them and throw them away. Should not have to explain this. And if anybody else, and I do not like being on like the phone patrol. It irritates me and I get banged. And you don't want me mad. And so if I keep them, I will return, I will take them up to the office when I leave at the end of the school day. That's when you can go get them. And when do I leave at the end of the school day? On that day, I'll make sure I leave at 4:30. You get my point here? Because I'll be irritated. Now, you might not have had it on, not even notice it. But should we not do that again? In fact, it just irritates me having to say this. Okay, so to get this, they collect more taxes, more land. And now the competition begins. Accumulate wealth for the state. Land, land, land. Constantly needing this. And so now we get to those are Those are the characteristics, and now we get to Prince Henry. Prince Henry the Navigator. He started a school of navigation, basically trying to figure out a way to take advantage of the trade and also to kill Muslims. He wanted to go on a crusade. And so there's lots of Muslims in Morocco. So he wants to spread the crusade to them. And he didn't know anything about this. All he knew is, I'm going to make people find a way around Africa. So that is actually, you have to write this down, but that's the Museum of Navigation in Lisbon. I was not there. A good friend of mine went and gave me the picture. And so there he is standing by the statue of that. Guy used to teach in Allen. Now he teaches in Hawaii, which I'm very jealous of. But that might be my retirement job for a year. And the Portuguese maritime. So what they began to do is slowly begin to go around Africa. And we saw this, they did a great job in the Dayton University Exchange. I have to go into great deal, but slowly begin to move around Africa. Oops. So exploring down the West Coast, bouncing along the West Coast. And they had a problem. They did a great job in the video talking about, well, they couldn't see the North Star once they got down to about here. So they had to come up with new ways. That's where they came up with the sextants and using the sun. What shape was the world? They all knew it. And so they knew this basic area. The problem was, even with the new ships, they had a very limited amount of space on the ship and water. That is one thing that I remember. Who was taught in elementary school that Columbus, they went and they thought the world was flat? Well, who was told that before? They thought the world was flat, yeah. And no, they did not think the world was flat. More people today probably think the world is flat. Because people can be twits. But moving on. And finally, when they bounce around here, I should add the winds are just horrible here. But Diaz finally bounced around this coast, nearly dying along this dry African coast. The wind circled, they couldn't move around. They finally, Diaz made it to here. Made it here, and then barely made it back. 2/3 of his crew died along the way.
How have they died?
Hmm?
How have they died?
Most of them died of lack of food, starvation. They also all caught scurvy, the lack of vitamin C. Don't catch scurvy. Here's my advice to you. Now, he arrived, we made it there, and what that meant is, you say, oh God, we almost died. Let's not do it again. What did they see? There's an incentive to get here and money. And so another sailor was able to convince the Portuguese, his name was Vasco da Gama. And he said, I have an idea. We know the world is round. We have no idea what's there, what's here. But we know the latitude now of it's called the Cape of Good Hope. By the way, that's why they called it the Cape of Good Hope. We made it. And the third of us that aren't dead, we made it here. He proposed, instead of bouncing around this awful coast, dry, almost impossible to find a place for water, fresh water, or food, to just take off straight south. The winds were better out in the middle, literally of nowhere, but they had maps and they knew that when you get to about this latitude, turn. This is rolling the die. I mean, this is all or nothing. And they turned and it worked. They got here in half the time and then bounced up the coast all the way along, attacking wherever they met, stealing and creating good will with everybody, and made it to India in 1498. It was an amazing fit of sailing, and this will be the way they go there. Loop around. One guy named Amerigo Vespucci was on his way doing that, started going this way, and the winds were bad, kept going this way. Now, I don't have a map here, but what's right about here on if we had the map extended? He arrived at Brazil. And that's why Brazil would become a Portuguese colony, and that's why they speak Portuguese in Brazil.
I don't know why they come with issue, we're trying to figure out who we belong to.
That's when we'll get to the Treaty of Tordesillas. So we arrived at a place called Calicut. which was a trading spot. Arab traders have been trading there, Chinese traders have been trading there, right here, Calicut. And they arrived in, and Da Gama rode in and immediately did what, well, first off, he got there and was so happy that there were Christians there, that he was just overwhelmed. Because along the way, he'd been fighting Muslims, and he saw Muslims, he immediately attacked, and they drove him off. Now, were there Christians here? No, none. What religion is the majority religion of India? Hindus. They're Hindus. But to his point of view, there's only two. The good guys, which are Christians, and the bad guys, who are Muslims. So if they're not Muslim, they must be Hindus. So he's just baffled by this weird Christianity. Eight-legged picture, eight-legged gods and elephants, and he just blew them away. But went to Calcutta, tried to set up a trading empire, ended up going to war with the people there and driven out. But eventually, Alfonso Albuquerque would come in, replacing Da Gama and establishing a Portuguese empire. Yeah, basically, Da Gama just came in and just started attacking everybody. And the Indians thought, these guys are absolute lunatics. But he went back, Da Gama went back to Portugal and said, there's money. He went back with 30 ships, able to conquer some, but Albuquerque is going to give them a massive Portuguese empire. And so they arrived here, went here, and the Portuguese spread throughout the Indian Ocean, all through this area, as far as what is now Indonesia, even up into what is China. They traded everywhere, ruthless, shocked everybody, just sail in and start shelling them and take over the trade. And money started pouring into Portugal, absolutely pouring in. And that leads to Christopher Colon, or as we call Columbus. So Columbus was born somewhere around 1451. He was a pirate, sailor, a navigator. We don't have any idea what he looks like. There are something like, you can find over 30 portraits of Columbus. This is one. Here is another. And he's the one who proposed first to Portugal. It'd be easier to go west and around than going around Africa. He had heard about how awful it was down here. He heard it. It's just terrible. He knew. And so he said this one. So he proposed it to Portugal. And there's something else he did. As shipping moved to here, he'd been to Iceland. And what did he hear about people in Iceland? So from this point of view, it must be a lot closer. It must be a lot closer. And so he said, I can go this way. I know. He didn't tell him all the details, but I know this. Portugal thought about it. And then he also got to hear this and that. We're fine. We can don't worry about it. And so then he went to Spain. And Spain was in the middle of kicking the last Muslim empires, the Moors, out of southern Spain. And he arrived just in the nick of time. I didn't put Spain, so I type in right in Spain. He went to Spain, went to the king and queen. No guy went to Spain. Actually, they turned it down. He was about ready to leave to France. And they said, no, wait. We just conquered Granada. Come talk to us. And Columbus said, I can get to China. I can beat the Portuguese and get you money that you spent in all these foreign wars. And they're like, fine. But they only gave him enough money for 2 ships. He was able to get private investors to get a 3rd ship. And they sailed west. And we saw this in the video the day the universe changed. We saw this in the video. Jumping right in. That is pretty close to Toscanelli's map. Now, I know it looks weird, but he's envisioning a globe and then spreading it out. And so let's take another version of that map. This is Toscanelli gave. This is the map Columbus had. So here's Spain. And as he saw it, Here, they guessed what China was, or Japan was like, blob. They guessed what the Indies were like, dots, and China. And they knew that latitude. So they knew, we go down to this latitude and go here and just keep on this latitude, we will get there. That's all we need to do. And so that's the map he had. And this shows where it was in the way. He didn't know about it. He also, Toscanelli said the map, the country or the world was about 20% larger than what Columbus said. Columbus tried to sell this, so we lied. It said it's about 20% smaller. And he went 3 ships, sailed out this little, basically a tiny little harbor right here, dropped down to this level, took off. The voyage wasn't horrible. They thought they would get there in about, he thought about 4 to 6 weeks. It was bad wind, so it's about 4 weeks into it. And they're sailing along, and the men are grumbling. When I was in elementary school, and I don't blame my teachers because they were told this and told this and told this. But they said that the men were worried they're going to sail off the end of the world and ready to mutiny and all this stuff. Not quite, they were just mad. And to keep morale up, when they're about right here, Columbus said, okay, I will give a pension for life for anybody who sees land first. Anybody know what a pension is? It's a little way. Yeah, guaranteed money for the rest of your life. For example, the United States now, if you work, when you retire, you're guaranteed a little bit of money called Social Security. And trust me, when you get closer to retirement, you think about those. Trust me, my guess is your grandparents got need that, like most people. But anyways, okay, this one. And then one of the men on the watch saw it. They saw land. And Columbus said, no, you didn't. Climbed up the mast, looked up and confirmed it was land. And said, since I'm the one who confirmed it, I get the point. So of course, that's what Columbus did. And they arrived probably right here, a little island in the Bahamas that today is called Watling Island, but we're not sure. And that's where they arrived. It was not the West Indies or the East Indies or Indonesia, but he called it that because he was trying to make sure. Well, partially because he kind of hoped it was, but secondly, I got to tell my mate. He called it the West Indies. And he said, first off, they found a little bit of gold, and so he's going to greatly exaggerate the amount of gold. Greatly exaggerate. And then eventually also take slaves, which also might be a form of gold. They found a native population called Arawaks or Caribs there. Very friendly people who kind of laughed and mocked the Spanish. The Spanish had better weapons and were shockingly ruthless. And I should add, the Spanish were just in awe of the first people they saw called the Arawaks, just in awe. They were so much bigger and more muscular, and they seemed so much healthier. It just blew them away. Columbus would write about these beautiful people that were so powerful and strong and courageous, and they would make great slaves. One of those interesting little quirks. He actually went in and had this whole religious ceremony, and they laughed at him. And so he kidnapped a few of the Arawaks to force them to learn Spanish. And basically, they heard about these crazy Spaniards and ran away. So they eventually went to another island called Hispaniola, but didn't find that much gold. So kidnapped 16 people and brought them back. Said, these got slaves. But said, there's all this gold, we just couldn't get it. And that was the key. They brought enough gold back that everybody believed it. And because of the printing press, news of gold in this new world spread all over Europe. All about this gold. All this news came, there's gold. And Columbus said, there's mountains of gold, and we just send more people over. But we got slaves. Mountains of gold. And this is going to trigger everything. Remember, the Northmen went, nothing really changed. And then, the Chinese, most certainly that did not trigger any exploration. This changed everything. The entire world would be different after this. Columbus was the trigger as a race for empire. And only the strongest states could do it. They all begin to chase for it. Spanish, the Portuguese, a little bit later, the French would jump in. Then you're relatively weak, but soon to be very powerful. The Italy, the Italian. That's it. I'm sorry, the English. And they're all looking for El Dorado. Anybody know what El Dorado means? Yeah, gold. And they're gonna find gold. Now, there weren't mountains of gold, but there was a lot. The amount of gold would double in Europe. And soon it's worldwide. Overnight, worldwide. Everything that people had once known would be different. That's why Columbus is important. Columbus is not important for getting to the New World because they're already, he didn't just start, right? There were probably 150 million people who lived in the Americas. What he did is he led or triggered globalization. And the world will never be the same. And out of this will eventually become a new economy, wars, racism, all would come out of this. So that is where we get sailing from Portugal. Ferdinand Magellan would circumnavigate the world in 1519. And that's not that long after. With the first crew, okay, he wouldn't make it. They sailed around here. They actually went through they didn't go around Terra del Fuego. They found this tiny little strait called the Straits of Magellan, which is incredibly dangerous to sail through. And they made it through. That is why this map has it as kind of weird land. They didn't know you could just go a little bit further south. I guess this is a treacherous journey. All the currents change. With sailing vessels, it was pretty scary. Magellan, they made it to the Philippines. If I said Portugal, I meant to sail for Spain. He made it to the Philippines, he got in war with natives, and he'd be killed them. I was always told he was eaten by cannibals, so why not? He was eaten by cannibals. But his crew made it back. All right. And so last thing for today. So the Treaty of Tordesillas would be right here. A line that would be made and divided by the Pope, where they divide the world in half. And basically what it said is then everything new discovered here would be Portugal. Everything new over here would be Spain. They moved the line to here 2 years later, but that's because Columbus arrived here. And this is important because even though nobody really acknowledged it, by the end of the 1400s, they knew this is not China. They knew. They didn't know what they had, but they knew. And so the Pope just basically divided the world up. Did anyone care? Not really, except it shows the power now that money did. But that's Brazil, that's Portuguese. So he's going to go 4 voyages, and that's where we quit. So tomorrow we'll finish up this last little bit. I'll tell you about the Incas. That's Monday. I gave you a map. I gave you a map. And so I'll give you time to finish up the map and then do one other thing. On the back of the map, you're going to see a product that was found in the New World that would change the way people live forever. The potato. They actually discovered tater pots. The first thing they discovered. So these are 2 things you got to do.
They discovered tater pots before they discovered potatoes.
Yeah, they started eating these deliciously greasy treats. I got them in my calendar. I know they're mounds of fat and they're good. Not disagreeing. We're humans. Anything that's fat, anything that's deep fat fried, we like.
Yeah.
I think I told you this first semester. Humans crave fat and salt. That goes back before there was simplification. Fat and salt. All right, same deal. See what you know without looking up, and then go from there. I mean, where's your man? I don't know where the no, just so you know. See, it's a focus subject. You shouldn't worry about it.
Absolutely. You can tell that the words.
Depends on that here, everyone, the last 2 weeks of March. Don't get me wrong, don't. That's problem with spring break, doesn't get anything. But I don't know, if you can, have you thought about Jordan, Montana? That would be beautiful for spring break. Yes. Some. They just put this in. There's not really, yeah. You know. Same thing with the outlet. This is useless.
I'll be doing it. I'll be doing a lot of things. I'll be doing this. Yeah.
All right, let's go. Just check the ones you know, and if you don't know it, then go and look it up. There was some Austrian intrigue into it. The voter empire was to split up in a bunch of small. So when they look for empire with the same ideas, they're looking for empire. So like the Holy Roman Empire, Austria would be looking about the whole. Yes. Yeah, you got it. What do you want to do with these? You want
We can think about the data like that.
So still have a few minutes to work, so are we done? If you look on the back, there's a few basic questions about the potato. And then it says on there. It asks a question about the potato, and it's on a separate sheet, just do it underneath, just probably a couple sentences underneath. All clones. Just. Yeah, and then you just put back this. You don't need to flip it. You don't need to use a separate sheet. If you can't find, let me know and I'll be glad to point randomly out a map. Let me handle spot. So recorded these, I just haven't finished the map. Invasion of the body snatchers. The map, this map is out of 15. So the data universe changed 2. I encourage this curiosity to know the law is. Now, it's right there. That's because everything is going to be put. Yeah, that is. Very much like that. Finish this. Some 15.
Oh my God.
There was this row and I just started grabbing one randomly. Good for you, look. 13 out. Oh. I was like 13 out. But you're an absolute. Ashton. Others.
Wait, say, so you would ask you.
Where I was
Monday. So Monday, my study all, I'm gonna have them all carry them down. Second Thursday.
And what if they?
That's. Oh, yeah. Like, that's Dominic's. And. Yeah, if he doesn't want it. So anyway.
So. It's like baseball band. Maddie got. Maddie got like. Not supposed to be.
They will be a surprise. Okay, I'll just be Oh.
Sorry about that. Always hard to.
Not a big deal. For the rest of the week. Delaney, 10 out of 12. 10 out of 12, I got recorded. Bodie, don't get 3 though, it's.
Yeah, right.
Don't, I don't want to do that.
Two less.
Don't, if you're not want to give me your 20, right? And you don't want one. All right, everybody, have a good weekend. Oh. So the potato thing, I'll give you the first 5 or 10 minutes class to finish up the potato thing in class. Once you have the math done, sound good? So this, you know the movie? That it was meant to be a whole. Are you able to get all that in class? It is pretty, for me? What is it?
Plants.
Hmm?
Plants.
Oh, for,
What's a plant?
yeah, sure, good, good.
Yep.
Oh, Cap Ivy music.
Are we playing I'm in Love by The Cure or Friday?
Friday I'm in love.
Playing that again?
Too much Cure.
It's a good song, and I don't like.
Roberts.
The,
You're talking shit about this.
No one better see it.
I know you.
I.
no, it's not a set chairs. Yeah, I don't know. We just been parked off on her.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Just like that, that's what you got. It's like the
Do you want Cap Ivy music? Now, there's a small group in here that really wants Friday I'm in love again. Do you want that? Or
Let's have some.
well, let's talk about that.
Bill and.
It's still a thing.
And
It's not even like a balloon. Oh my God. It's so funny.
We're just discussing.
Who would like Norwegian pop music from the 1980s? Yes.
Yeah, they keep, I watched the last 2 episodes. I just put caps on that.
That's not. It's.
All right, check out the stuff for them that we listened to. You're Norwegian. I'm warning you. I'm warning you. You're Norwegian. I don't know. All right. This song. Every girl I would talk to loved the song that I do. All right. No more eating. Grow up with. We got music today, everything's wrong with their business. All right, get the blind. Get the blinds back there. Let's get going. So, remember, you have to give 2 examples of Cold War fears, 4 continuity errors, and 1 more thing. What is the ultimate weapon? And what does it represent? The ultimate weapon, what it represents. Or you'll find out. And I just want you to be very, very, what's the word I'm looking for?
Scared.
Afraid. We can all be scared, but are you afraid? Look to the skies. I'll tell you in just a second. So, remember, and what happened to Bella? So this is Dr. Tom Wilson, or Watson. But you have no sound. I love the music too. Okay. I wish you get this. Yeah. Now this is the most famous scene in the movie. I'm lying about the waist. Can all move, can fuck, just blankets. By the way, we're not clear from music. Inspector. Actually could get stuck. That's become one of the most popular horror movies in the last